horror stories, what author do you think of? Who do you think has greatly contributed as well as elevated the horror genre? Who do you think is the king of horror and the master of mystery? There may be many names that come to mind, but there is only one that stands out, and that is Stephen King. Everyone has read one of his books, seen one of the movies made from one of his books, or has at least heard his name before. Stephen King has been one of the greatest horror story writers over his 4-decade career. When asked why horror, Stephen King replied with, quote, "It's built in, that's all. The first movie I ever saw was a horror movie. It was Bambi. When that little deer gets caught in a fire, I was terrified, but I was also exhilarated. I can't explain it." End quote. Stephen King, even from a young age, was interested in horror. He loved scary movies and scary comics. He loved to scare people and also play pranks on them. Clearly, he was meant to write horror versus any other genre of literature. Stephen King was destined to write horror for 3 reasons. First, life events contributed to his stories. Second, drugs and alcohol didn't inhibit him. And third, he does horror stories well. Many people wonder how Stephen King comes up with such terrifying stories, but the answer is much easier than it seems. First, life events contribute to his stories. According to the Internet Movie Database article on Stephen King, when he was 2, his father walked out. He said he was stopping for cigarettes one night and then never returned. This greatly upset Stephen because it left his mother, who is a caretaker at a mental health institution, with a lot of bills she had to pay off. All of the dad issues that are in Stephen King's books are based off of this event. When he was 51, he got hit by a van while he was taking a walk. He's thrown about 14 feet off of the road and ended up with a bruised lung, broken ribs, broken leg, and a fractured hip. He had to stay in the hospital for another 3 weeks undergoing surgery to help repair these problems. He later had to have surgery to remove scar tissue as well as fluid from his lungs when he had pneumonia. Currently, he is suffering from macular degeneration. The Rolling Stone interview with Stephen King in 2014 shares that his childhood religion is shown in Revival. Lizzie's story is about marriage, and he used his own marriage as a basis for the book. He has unpleasant dreams, and he says, quote, "Whatever machinery that you have that goes into writing stories, it doesn't want to stop. So that's where most of his stories come from." As shown by my first point, many of his life events contribute to his stories. He uses his own life as a reference, and which most people don't realize, and most other fiction writers don't do. Not only have life events influenced his writing, but so has substance abuse. Second, drugs and alcohol did not inhibit him. The previously cited 2014 Rolling Stone interview with Stephen King explains that Stephen King has had a drug problem since college and started drinking at age 18. He wrote while high. He wrote the book Misery and said it is about cocaine. He says that the main character, Annie Wilkes, is cocaine. King admits that his writing did go downhill and says that Tommyknockers is an awful book and it was the last one he wrote before getting clean. He also says that Dreamcatcher was written while he was right after the accident, so he is high on OxyContin while writing that one. The Internet Movie Database article on Stephen King, which was previously cited, says Stephen King was an alcoholic. He was drunk the entire time he was writing Cujo and doesn't remember writing it at all. King's wife organized an intervention for him and started by dumping out the trash can. In it contained cigarettes, beer cans, drug paraphernalia, and cough and cold medicines. After that, he became clean and sober, and is still clean to this day. To summarize my second main point, even though he was an alcoholic and a drug user, he is able to write books that people enjoyed and still fit the horror genre, which is something not a lot of people could do. The most important part of making a career for oneself is finding something that you love and doing it well. Third, he does horror stories well. According to an article published in The Atlantic in 2013, King says, "An opening line should invite readers to begin the story. It should say, 'Listen, come in here. You want to know about this.'" He explains that an appealing voice is supposed to achieve intimate connection with the reader. A writer's voice should be so distinct that anyone can recognize it anywhere, which obviously Stephen King has done a very good job of doing. The previously cited article on Stephen King by Internet Movie Database shows that Stephen King's books have been published in over 35 countries in 33 languages, and it is estimated that over 300 million copies of his books have been published. He has published 54 novels, 7 of which were written under his pen name Richard Bachman. He has also published over 200 short stories, 6 nonfiction books, and is a contributing columnist for Entertainment Weekly. He has won tons of awards and has been nominated for even more. A couple of the awards he has won include World Horror Convention World Horror Grand Master, Mystery Writers of America Great Master Award, and the World Fantasy Award Lifetime Achievement. To review my third main point, Stephen King does horror stories well. He wasn't cut out to be any other kind of writer. In conclusion, Stephen King has always been intrigued by horror, making his career writing horror inevitable. Stephen King was destined to write horror because life events contributed to his stories, drugs and alcohol didn't inhibit him, and he does horror stories well. Stephen King has been the creator of many people's worst nightmares. I remember growing up, both of my parents would always read Stephen King books. When my dad had his appendix removed, he laid on the couch for 3 days and read The Stand. As I got older, I decided I wanted to read these books for myself and see if they're actually as scary as my parents made them sound. The main ingredient that goes into a horror story is some kind of evil. When asked if evil is real, Stephen King said, quote, "I believe in evil, but all my life I've gone back and forth about whether or not there really is an outside evil, whether or not there's a force in the world that really wants to destroy us, from the inside out, individually and collectively, or whether it all comes from inside and that's all part of genetics and environment." When looking at the evils that influenced his life, one could really argue in either direction, but ultimately, without those evils, we wouldn't have some of the greatest horror stories that we have today.